Okay, so I want to, let's see, it's quite difficult to figure out how to do this, because what I need to show you is what all these different forces coming together looks like. Now, there was an article yesterday in The Guardian, which I will post underneath, about children in care homes being, treated like cattle, and it's about the cost of private providers and the impact of so many private providers and the cost for children. And what this is really important, because this has been growing for a long time. And if you read the Victoria Climbié inquiry, you'll find, and the literature surrounding that within the professions of social work, you will find the impact of managerialism on their ability to uphold the rule of law, and the impact of organisational structures, of crumbling local authorities, of terrible fucking processes. And one of the recommendations with Climbié was that a chronology had to be put on each file so that you could pick it up and just look at it. And that actually was a really interesting recommendation, and I actually had a job once doing the chronologies for a children's team, which meant kind of doing chronologies for 15, 20-year-old files. And it really made a massive difference. And then they introduced a computer system, which removed our ability to do that. So that was great. Now, I've posted underneath the original article, Mapping the Margins, by Kimberly Crenshaw. And I want you to read it. It's not academic. It's really, really not. And she describes the way that women organising, and she's writing about black women in America, but I'm talking about working class women in the UK. In 1989, she was saying, for about 20 years, women have been organising. We've developed these systems, to protect ourselves from violence, and we've developed an understanding of how power relations reproduce. And we had, and this was 1989. Now, in America, there are issues with non-development of the welfare state because of racism and black women, which I'm going to come to at some point. But in the UK, the intersectionality that she's discussing is not feminism, because feminism is the New Statesman and the Guardian selling bullshit. Intersectionality is the rule of law. So what intersectionality is about, it's about what Hayek was saying. It's about the need to reflect on power dynamics, and about the need to reflect on the way different institutions function and the way power relations reproduce and the things that we can't see. And this has shaped our system too. And it's this, which was done by women largely, which was enabled by the shifts that I'm discussing. So that's the changes to family structure, which have also shaped institutions and necessitated the emergence of new aspects of the economy and the evolution of systems that cross paid and unpaid spheres. Now, before I move on, I want to talk about the basic principles of care economics. So every institution functions differently. I'm not a health person, I don't understand education, but I do understand care. Now, basically, care labour is labour, which is it's directly linked to a kinship relation usually, and this relationship is the primary output of this labour, and it can't be abdicated, and the labour itself cannot be abdicated. You cannot abdicate care labour, and that sounds like a really posh way. So basically, go find yourself a newborn baby, put that newborn baby down, and then try not to pay attention to it for 2 minutes. You cannot abdicate care labour without crisis relating to abuse or neglect, which are linked to political responsibility. This is the driver for these systems. This is the very clever thing that we've got. So you abdicate care labour, you create a crisis. If I decide, and actually I'm looking at my hovel of a house, if I decide not to clean my house for however long it's been, eventually it's neglect. I've got to be honest. Do you know what I mean? I have to do it. Because eventually there comes a point where it's a problem that I haven't done it. And mothers are the bottom line for this. And our bodies, are where life is produced. And so the evolution of systems to do with care has been central to women becoming market actors and kind of stepping forward on the world stage out of property. But it's actually also women that have upheld these systems. Now, what happens if you apply market rationale to care institutions is you're applying a belief system which cannot see or conceptualise either the links between different systems which define these systems. Certainly care labour responds entirely the opposite way to the market forces that most economists have considered. This is the counterbalance, this is the stabiliser. And largely you can't value care labour because, well, its value is what it facilitates, which is the rest of the market economy. So it's a direct reflection of that value all the time. But what you see in that article around The Guardian is what happens when a belief system that's about fracturing down organisations, stripping down the primary output that can't be measured and replacing it with efficient tasks, you eventually remove the ability to provide that. And that's happening. And what we did in 2010 was we basically applied this market rationale to all these institutions that were functioning fine, and we've decimated them. And in social work, it's not the capacities to care that get stripped out, it's the capacities to protect, the capacities to reflect, the capacities to build a relationship, the capacity to oversee, and the links to democratic accountability. And ultimately what we've had for quite a long time, and one of the things that I had to accept, and the reason that my analysis has gone so far ahead of other people's, is because people within institutions cannot accept that there is system failure and that we have passed that threshold. I was unfortunately pushed past that point in Keighley with CSE, where the combination of risk thresholds and political marginalisation had meant that these girls were, this entire team, not just the girls we were working with, all the kids that were over 11, which is a much bigger problem than CSE, were at the bottom of the pile anyway. Market pressures were coming down because we had imposed a market rationale on these systems so that out-of-authority placements cost so much money that was the only focus of the team, because we didn't have the budgets. And you've got diminishing budgets, and then because this is not actually a market, you've got private providers in a quasi-market who are just, they're charging what they fucking like. And we've got fractured services, and we've got what's described in The Guardian. Except The Guardian caused it, because The Guardian have just stated with the word TERF and with their attempt to facilitate austerity that they're not even aware that this is the case. So we have these systems that have been shaped, A, by this fundamentally powerful change to family unit, to women's roles, to a completely changed society where these are the contexts that has changed around economic models, which already cross paid to unpaid spheres, which already are linked to democratic accountability and legal responsibility. We have functions like me who are trained to reflect on that, but we have policymakers who've been demanding that this is what we do. And as a response to crisis, if you look at the Ofsted measures for dealing with failing authorities, it's just the application of more market rationale and more providers, and it's just fracturing the service down and fracturing the service down. And in 2009 with CSE, the reason that I'm actually broken by it is not just the CSE, although it was horrible, that aspect of it. CSE was only one type of caseload. We weren't protecting any kids over 11 at all. So it wasn't just CSE. It was the kids who were being abused at home, and it was the kids who were being abused by other third parties, and it was the kids who were at risk, and it was the kids who were traumatised from earlier abuse. But the combination of pressures meant that they were marginalised within a system that was eroded and broken. It had been eroded and broken by a belief system which saw it as local authorities and market rationale as everything. And the consequence was, by the time we got to 2009, it was that. And then Baby P happened. And we all read that serious case review and knew exactly what happened. Because we'd all had a fucking dozen cases where we'd been sent up and down the line and told to make what worked because we couldn't get legal and we couldn't get medical. Do you know what I mean? We'd all had dozens like that. And what Baby P showed was that also the site of political responsibility for this was broken, because Ed Balls just did that. And he basically threatened Haringey with more privatisation and threw them under a bus. And literally framed them. This has been unsustainable, and the problem with this belief system cannot be applied to child protection. But the real problem is that these systems have been broken in plain sight for a long time, because the left and right only view them in terms of their political usefulness, and they don't have any political usefulness because these are systems where we're looking at our absolute fucking worst nightmare. And if people are interested in these systems and are interested in these issues, you should actually be a bit suspicious of those people, because nobody wants to look at these systems, and that's very human. But that's why they're contained within the rule of law. And what's become apparent, especially, I mean, when we were literally begging the Labour left in 2010, please, 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 do you understand? Do you understand that this is the rule of law for the most vulnerable people? And what intersectionality is about is the rule of law within these systems, within local authorities, is almost entirely about reflection on power dynamics, reflections on the impact of intervention, reflection on the way that systems link together, managing risk through developing relationships, and understanding that, you know, marginalisation repeats and systems reproduce abusive power relations if you don't reflect on that power, which is absolutely 100% prima facie what Hayek was saying would happen. Intersectionality is the manifestation of what Hayek said would happen. It is the rule of law in England. And the confusion is that in America it's not the rule of law, but here it fucking is. And here we have the situation where a mediating class who believe that our political economy is shaped by whether they think people are deserving have undermined that rule of law. And we're now in that correction where institutional failure is showing them what has shaped these systems and what these systems do, often for the first time because they don't fucking know what these systems do. But they're also panicking because the failure of these systems is causing political crisis and they don't know how they work. And our elite cultures don't know how to say, we don't know how they work. And the people that they need to be looking at are the people they can't see, which is the women within these systems. I don't know if that made sense.